Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. I'm Marie Cooley, the Department Chair for Interior Design, and we're here to listen to an absolutely amazing woman today. But before we do that, I want to introduce Dr. Barbara Galogli, the Chair of Gerontology, who's helped do this. Just a quick mention, thank you also to the State Family Consumer Science mini grant that we received to pay for Patty's expenses to get her here, so we really appreciate that. So I had written something up, thinking about, I'll tell you all about Patty, but we really don't have that much time. I just want to tell you that she's a gift that I'm sharing with you because she's an absolute treasure, and we're so fortunate that she's here. She's absolutely amazing. A quick little thing, if you didn't know, Patty has designed a Boeing jet. She's designed stuff for NASA. She invented the quick release on the mammogram machine. She has just done all kinds of amazing things. She is so innovative. She is here to save humanity. So anyway, we do have to wrap up at 10 after, but there is a reception in the library atrium following, and that's where if there's not time for questions and answers here, we can take them over to the library atrium and do the questions and answers over there. I also want to let you know, thank you, Patty. She has donated her time to be here. She's not charging us, and we really appreciate it. Thank you to the CTL for taping the event today and helping coordinate it as well. Thank you.
We'll thank them twice that my cheekbones out of this. Watch my light. Well, hello. Playing with my tail back here, less than discreetly. Sorry, that's got it. Okay, can you hear me all right? Okay, good. Just give me that high five. I found you. I speak extemporaneously, and so if it looks like I've gone into tongues, don't worry, it's all very important. But I have to respond. I saw giggles over here about mammography, and not to embarrass the gentleman in the room, but I need to quickly tell you, those of us in design, and also those of us who have to do with service and policy, I think it's important to recognize that oftentimes you hear no. You hear no from clients. You hear no from the government. And it can be very frustrating because in your heart, combined with what you know in your head, you often feel passionately about a potential solution. And yet you meet this roadblock, this gatekeeper who says, I'm sorry, no, we don't have the budget for it, we don't have the time for it, we don't have the means for it, sorry. Go back to your cubicle and behave. There'll be no more of that creative crap out of you. And I came out of that venue because when I started as an industrial designer, I was the only woman in Raymond Loewy's New York office. 350 architects, interior designers, graphic designers, packaging designers, product designers, environmental designers, engineers, one woman, aside from the secretarial pool, which of course, as every smart man knows, is where the power be. I became very friendly with Mr. Loewy's secretary, Doris. And Doris was what we like to technically refer to as a hoop and holler. And I'd run into Doris in the ladies' loo. And one day, I noticed that she was sort of wincing and moaning a little bit, and every time she moved, she seemed to be adjusting herself. And I said, Doris, is something wrong? I thought maybe she mistook the proper size at Macy's annual January bra sale. But what she told me was she had just had a mammogram. Relatively new technology, but of course, being in New York City, we were able to get them. And she said it was akin to lying down in the driveway and having someone drive over your breast, and that she didn't recommend it. Certainly something had to be done. That it was quite Hitlerian. Clearly the Marquis de Sade was alive and well, and there had to be something I could do Now, I was a mere 20 then, especially for you young ladies that are looking at careers in design. And I can tell you, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders in that moment because I realized I had to help Doris. I couldn't watch her wince and groan and moan like that again next year. And we went to General Electric before they became General Electric Medical Systems and asked if they had any interest in developing the unit, and they didn't. So it wasn't until some years later that a very sweet man came to my office and announced, oh, I see, okay. I thought somebody was correcting me, maybe, sorry. They told me we're not in any sort of earthquake danger, and I like to take your word for that because I have a history of always speaking during earthquakes. There was a 6.3 in Alaska last year. That was fun. This gentleman came to me, and I could see eyes clouded with tears. I offered him a seat and asked him what I could do. And he told me he had just lost his mother. And you'll have to forgive me because, you know, that stuff never goes away. I'm right back there in that moment. He was an electrical engineer. He had an idea for a new X-ray tube that would emit less X-ray than a tooth X-ray. And he thought maybe we could design a machine around his invention. And we did. It became known as the low-rad mammographic unit. It's still on the market. It was the first independent company in radiological science, which was quite a feat in its day. And we also did something rather remarkable in as much as we put it at a price point so that OBGYNs could afford to have one right in their office. So when you came in for your annual exam, you would have your pap smear and your examination. You could step into the next room and have a breast exam. We were charging $42,000 for the unit. Bless you. And we heard from General Electric again. They were very unhappy with the price point. We had to add some zeros to it. They wanted it off the market. First they tried to sue on a design patent, and they lost. And then they offered to buy the company, and they won. And so the price point went up, and you do not necessarily go in for your annual exam, do you, ladies, and go right into the next room for a breast exam, and that's why. Welcome to America. You will find I'm very political. That's one of my lessons I'd like to leave you with today. You must all be. I think if we are not hyper citizens as designers and policymakers, we fail the constituencies we serve. But let me go back to the magnetic release. At the time, Citibank was funding the development of this unit because, as you can imagine, this lovely man, although he had some means, he did not have enough to develop a machine that had to pass FDA rigors. And so we had to borrow a lot of money, and we had suits who came in periodically to the design studio to check our progress. And it came the day to show them the prototype that was a working prototype. And I pointed out that there was one more feature I wanted to add, and that was an automatic release. Well, we don't need that, do we? That sounds expensive. Really, I mean, no reason to slow down progress of the launch. Let's just go ahead, shall we? I said, yes, let's just go ahead into my shop. I have a lovely little vice grip. I'm trying to be careful because I have a brand new friend here at Remington, and I want to be mindful of language. But I hope you're with me. The boys in the suits did not take kindly to my vulgarity. But I got the check. Okay, enough of the sidebar. 25 years ago, amazingly, ladies and gentlemen, 25 years ago, when I was in my late 20s working in New York with Raymond Loewy, who, by the way, is the father of industrial design in the United States, if you're unfamiliar with his name. Designed a lot of cars for Studebaker, designed the Coca-Cola logo, Exxon logo, everything from Rosenthal, China, to NASA and the Apollo program. We were a full-service design office. We were the largest design office consultancy in the world for a very long time, followed by Henry Dreyfuss and then Walter Dorwell Teague. And then the 60s happened and the major big boy offices started to fracture and small startups like IDEO and Pentagram and Smart Design took their place. I was also one of the founding members of Smart Design. So I've been with offices of all shapes and sizes. And in what appears to be a growing number of consultancies, for those of you who are still studying and looking forward to your careers, I now run a virtual office. So I am that lady in the TV commercial with her bunny slippers and her baby and sitting there with her suit top and her pajama bottoms at the kitchen table, and I can highly recommend it. Even with that, I do travel over 200 days of each year, so I essentially live in hotels and airplanes. To wit, my nephew, sharing show and tell one day, told that story, and I think there was some fear about my profession. But here I was in my late 20s, very frustrated, in the loo with Doris, and saying, you know, if I have one more moan when I mention designing something so that someone like my grandmother can utilize it, someone with arthritis can manage it, someone with low vision can see it, someone with low hearing can hear it, someone who ambulates not with one foot in front of the other but with wheels can manage it. If we don't get to that point, and quickly, I am quite concerned for the quality of life of us all. Now this, of course, was well before we started worrying about the baby boom cohort. Demographers had started blowing the whistle on the fact that we were aging. Imagine that. I love, don't you, in the press, we always see these articles, meeting the needs of aging America. But you never seem to see the flip side of the coin, meeting the needs of dead America. And I say that quite seriously. Whenever someone points out to me they have an aging parent, I tell them how happy I am that their parents are breathing. And so to that point, if anyone feels like they're going to leave the ranks of the aging today, if you wave, we can probably resuscitate. I have epinephrine with me, and we can do our thing. So what is it we're saying when we use such patronizing, pejorative, negative speech? Why are we so worried? Why do we divide the population into these groups? Why, as I said to Doris in the loo that day, do we keep talking about those people as if somehow they weren't consumers? Now, mind you, this was the late 70s, so we didn't have any of the language we embrace today. We didn't have any of the calls for equality by design. We didn't hear about aging in place. We didn't hear about universality, inclusive solutions. We didn't hear about lifespan solutions, programs, and services. And we certainly weren't, as architects and product designers, messing with those people. And we were being taught that after a certain age, and by the way, it was 40, we really didn't have to worry about meeting your consumer needs. Struck me as quite ridiculous. I was raised in a household with my grandparents. I remember the day after church when I was sitting at the kitchen table, my legs kicking, waiting for Grammy to tell me what chore I was going to get to help her with, because that was her true joy, making Sunday supper, giving my mom a day off, making her special noodles, surprising us with some yummy pie. My job was always to chop or cut or measure. I'm sure I was more in the way than a help, but I was her beloved grandchild and she was my Grammy. I remember her walking over to the refrigerator as we were chattering, reaching for the handle. She gave it a tug and there was a sound. I'd never heard it before. It was almost like a mouse's squeak, a cry really, but it came out of Grammy. I was so confused. And then I saw, as she put her hand under her other arm, like hiding a wounded wing. And then she wandered out of the kitchen and down the hall and into her bedroom, and I kept saying, Granny, Granny? Realizing something had happened, something was clearly wrong, but I had no idea what was going on. I was so confused. I went out to the backyard where Mother was cutting some flowers, and I said, Mommy, something's wrong with Granny. I think she's crying. My mother said, what happened? I said, I don't know. She was at the refrigerator, and then she went to her room. My mother followed. The door was closed. After a little bit, she came out. I saw her reach into her apron pocket, into this apron, and wipe her eye, and sort of check her posture and march into the kitchen and say, well, come on, let's start supper. And my heart sank because I love my mother, but she can't cook. We had that one lousy meal every week we could count on. But I was a good little girl, and I sucked it in and chopped something for her, and later we ate whatever it was, and Grammy never came to the table, and a tray was brought to her room. And then later my dad brought it back, and it hadn't been touched. And within the year, she got her wings. I don't know that I've ever recovered from that, because it wasn't until I began my studies in gerontology that I realized what I had witnessed that day. My grandmother's heart was broken, and her will to live was lost. And even though, organically, there was very little wrong, and quite everything right with this woman, in the moment that she could no longer do the things that she loved to do as a consumer, not as an elder, as a woman who wanted to cook a meal for the people she loved, that is when her life stopped. And we lost her. I remember, too, the day when I came home within the first semester of college to surprise my family, and I was surprised because they weren't home. And I'm wandering through a dark house, but I realized I saw something move in the back bedroom, Grandpa's room. And there he sat, silhouetted against the blinds with the streetlight coming through the window. And I realized, because I saw his movement, he was awake. Why was he in the dark? I flipped the wall switch and I saw the tears. Grandpa, what are you doing in the dark? And I wanted to take the words back, because I realized while he was sitting in his wheelchair next to a lamp, he could not any longer do that motion. It wasn't too many years later that I got to work on one of the first thermal processor lamps. You spank the metal and the light comes on. And that one was for Grandpa. And now we work for Whirlpool, and every time we make something that doesn't require that you be able to grip and hang on and have the capacity to yank, that one's for Grandpa. And so, ladies and gentlemen, so you too will have your charges in life. Some will be very personal and some will be on behalf of others. But one of the other lessons I'd like to share with you today is what I learned because of the very precious gift of what happened next in this point in my career. And that was going to one of those obligatory parties that your girlfriends have when you're dog-tired and all you want to do is get a good night's rest. But you know if you don't show, you're going to get hairy eyeballs on Monday, so you better go. And I was so close to leaving. I had had my obligatory Triscuit and cheddar cheese with a half a glass of Chardonnay. I was so close to the door. And I heard a cheery voice say, "Hi, my name's Barbara. What's yours?" I hate when I have to be nice. So I said hello. I told her who I was. We started chattering about work, and she explained she was a makeup designer at NBC. She was doing Belushi, Chevy Chase, and Coneheads, and Samurai Warriors, and Hamburger, Coke. All the classics. And I remember hearing myself say, "Can you make me look like I'm in my 80s?" And she said, "Sure." She's from Brooklyn, and that's how she felt. And so, a few weeks later, I was on an airplane flying to a conference at Ohio State, a meeting of architects who were meeting to talk about designing skilled nursing care for the elderly. And that was one. On the plane ride there, it became very clear the flight attendants were not thrilled to have so much trouble on board. You know, you do have to remember back then you didn't really see a lot of elders, especially flying independently. And there were the eyes rolling and the whispers up in the galley. And when she lowered the tray to give me a cup of tea, which then slid into my lap, you know, back then we weren't suing McDonald's for boiling coffee, but I could have. So here I show at the conference not only in character, but in messy dress, which was not my style. But what was so deplorable was the non-response of a flight attendant who had just scalded me with hot water and tea and just seemed to be so put out that I was so much trouble. Is that a design issue? Yeah, it is. Is it also a human service issue? Yeah. Can we separate the two? And what do I believe? That design is the pathway for all social change. I think you will see as your schooling progresses and as you pursue your careers that design, more than ever before, is the anthropology of our time, and it is applied and proactive, and it will in fact redefine quality of life. It is our time at bat, and I think we have to be very aggressive in taking the plate. Yes, I love baseball. Any excuse for a hot dog is okay with me. I know it's pathetic, but I like hot dogs. In character, I could spend hours sharing with you what I learned. But let me just tell you briefly what I felt. That very first day, I was made aware that there were two types of people in the world. People who cared about others and those who did not. That taxi driver who finally, after seeing so many cabs pass me, in horror at the thought of dealing with me, no doubt. The driver who stopped couldn't have been sweeter, but I can tell you there had to have been elders in his life that he adored and loved and cared about. The volume of his voice was so high, we learned a very quick lesson, and that was for me not just to wear hearing aids that were non-operative, but to wear earplugs under the hearing aids. I had such a headache by the time we got to LaGuardia. He tucked in my skirt so that the door didn't hit it. He took my hand in my arm and put his arm around my waist and helped me. He shoo-shooed the red cap who was trying to grab my things and got me right to the counter. Of course, today his cap would be gone, but it was a different time. That also was a design issue. We've got to figure out something about the infrastructure of air travel before I go completely start raving mad. And you will one day turn on the news at 11 and see gerontologist runs amok. The lady at the counter, I remember, was very kind, very sweet. Again, here too, I have to believe she had an elder in her life, and that's how she learned to deport herself so appropriately. But then there was the flight attendant. And then there was the taxi driver when I got to Columbus. And then there were all the architects at the conference who let the doors swing in my face and didn't offer me a seat when they were having little coffee clutches, and no one asked if I wanted a cup of tea. And it wasn't until the second day when my friend who was in on the whole thing, the late Tom Flyers, who was an architect with the Gerontological Society in Washington, a man ahead of his time, a man who was so intimately aware of the importance of the environment in mating or quality of life issues, that he was struggling to get grants, struggling to get schools of architecture and design to talk about the issues, to teach about the potentials. And so we became fast friends. He was leading the conference, and there he sat at the head table, and we were doing a Q&A after the last speaker, and someone said, you know, yesterday there was that old lady here. We could have maybe asked her a question or two. And Tom, on cue, reached into a paper bag underneath the table and pulled out my wig. And it was sort of like a wave at a football game, as everybody went, uh-oh. Really smart ones realized something had happened. And then they heard Tom say, she's still here. And I walked out on stage, and there was an audible gasp. We sat and we talked for the next 3 hours about what had just happened and why we had egg on face and what were we going to do about it. And why, if we were so sure we were there to work on behalf of the constituency who needed us so desperately by design, why weren't we involved in them? Actively, working with them, listening to them, loving and hearing and caring and sharing. Why was our methodology so flawed? Why did we assume we knew best? And sadly, I must tell you, students in particular, it still is like that out there. You are not going to walk into the nirvana land of inclusive design. You are going to have very stupid bosses. They are plentiful. You are going to have to learn how to trickle up information and be aware that you are not necessarily going to learn from the leaders in your firms. You are going to have to develop skill sets in negotiating and caring and sharing. And please don't hurt anybody because my bail fund is growing very small. You have to have a sense of humor. And you can't stop and you can't give up. And you have to make it personal. I learned that every time I hit the streets of the 116 cities I visited over the course of nearly 4 years. Every time I took to a characterization that made me wake up to the fear behind ageism, to the hatred embodied in age bias. When I was a bag lady on the streets and someone felt they could walk by and spit in your face because you had the innocence of being homeless, and to that poor, sweet man who I heard screeching as he ran across Green Street, scooped me up, and then went running back with me in his arms to his apartment, and the whole time I'm going, wait! And as he got the warm cloth and started wiping my eyes and telling me, don't open your eyes, don't open your eyes, and trying to get the spittle off my face, and my skin started to come off. We check on him periodically, and although it's been 25 years, they really think one day he will get out. It was in moments like that that the Army grew, that I got sidekicks who were able to help with all of the various scenarios we put into play. So then every time I was in New York, he would be my loving grandson, taking me to the park, maybe sometimes pushing me in a wheelchair, other times taking my arm as I walked with my fancy stick, dressed in a mink. So you see, we did every social, economic level that we could imagine, every level of help. We put my characters, myself, into settings that we take for granted each and every day: restaurants, theaters, buses, planes, trains, hydrofoils. And we learned how hostile the environment was, but more so, how afraid we were to grow older. Because we are still a culture that talks about getting old, not growing older, not embracing it as the natural gift and joy that it is. Grandma used to say, anytime you open your eyes is another good day. Grandpa used to say every time he'd be down there trying to put on his slippers, he'd think of other things that he could do since he had made it that far. So I was raised with people who had happy hearts, and I never heard moaning or groaning, even though they certainly had cause. I was on stage the night that the call came to phone home. Got back to my hotel room, saw the little red light, message. Shook as I dialed. I heard my sister's voice, I heard the tears, and I knew our father had passed. And then she explained it was Grandpa. You see, my father has coronary disease, and he's been dying for 23 years. We're Irish, so forgive the dark humor. I like to remind my daddy when I'm dragged home every year for his birthday celebration that only the good die young. I have further advised him he is not living with me. My mother is Edith Bunker, my father is Archie Esk, and my daddy has had benefit for 57 long years of a live-in geisha. And I'm not taking her place. It's a big desert, Daddy, and I look good in black. I think Colleen Margaret Mary is going to get him. She was his favorite anyhow, so she should have him. But pity Barbie Jane, who lives across the street from my parents, who have been married 57 years. They're both 78, quite honestly puppies as far as geriatrics goes. Mother's quite healthy, Daddy's quite ill, and hopefully she'll hang in there, as she did the night she had to take that call with me to tell me that her father had died. And I said, you know, Mother, what's really interesting for me is I was on stage, and I had prepared something in my head. You see, I don't work with notes, but there's always something in my head that's fed by my images, and I wanted to focus on that. It was a business news group of some kind, and I say business news deliberately because there were no news. And I had things to tell the suits, and I wanted to get it right. Somehow I started talking about being in that little red rowboat with my drop line and my grandpa. And I told all the stories of my childhood and how much I loved this man. I told him about the silhouette on the blinds and the importance of design. And then my time was up, and I thought, oh, didn't cover exactly what I thought I was going to do tonight. And it wasn't until I got that call that I realized why. My beloved grandfather passed in his bed, in his room, with my mommy, his baby, by his side. He was 95. He woke that morning, wasn't quite right, the doctor was called, and the promise was kept to let him be. He wasn't taken to the hospital, needles didn't go into his arm. But Mom stayed at his side and held his hand and chatted all day long, and every once in a while he'd open his eyes and smile or give her a wink. And right around supper, he did that one last time. Please God, we should be so lucky. What I learned, what I felt, is the importance of that empathy. In all things that you do, the importance of understanding, of finding a way to get what's in your heart and head across, even when the Citibank guys tell you no. You must do what you're passionate about. You must do on behalf of others what you can. And you must look at design as the global event that it is, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and something that you take charge. in character. I had more dates as an elder than I did as a woman in her 20s, and that's a whole other workshop. You take your vitamins, you behave yourselves, because I can tell you we do not like dancing at weddings together, we women. We really do like men. I'm sick of doing the polka with my sister. Let's go, boys. Remington, you have quite a challenge on your shoulders. Do you see all these people here? Do you know, sweetheart, statistically, your tax dollars are going to support all of these people, you by yourself? I know you're smart. You're doing the math. It doesn't add up, does it? Yes. Hello. This is our future. Why don't I get tax abatement and rebate and refund for what I do to help my parents? Modifications in their homes. I'm going to mention aging in place in a few moments. Reagan did it. Why isn't this administration embracing that? The baby boomer is spending a great deal of money managing the lives and independence and autonomy of their parents. Not selfishly. They're really worried because they don't want to end up in one of those places, and they're certainly not going to let mom and dad do it. They want to make sure they get whatever's left in the estate. No, I think we are doing it for the right reasons. We've just built a large addition on our home in Phoenix because Mother will live with us when Daddy gets his place. But I worry about Remington and his generation, less so about you Gen X's and Gen Y's, which, by the way, every time a demographer rants about how huge and wonderful the baby boom cohort is, whoop, whoop, 77 million, 78, whatever it is, when you add Gen X and Gen Y together, you supersede us. Use your power. Use the power of numbers. Because we have to start remediations with products and places and people doing the right thing. If we rely on taxation and a medical model to go about this curative bit on aging, we've all failed miserably. It is not working, ladies and gentlemen. It could never work, and it's nonsensical. Let's watch out for Remington. I want to make sure that he can enjoy some of his change instead of just paying our way, because we did a miserable job by design. The most important thing I learned, age has nothing to do with anything we do. The real factor is ability. The variable is ability, your level of capacity, the means by which you do things. That is what you need to focus on. And let me see if I can demonstrate it. I flew over Snowy Mountain, so I had to just have one last vestige of winter. I would no sooner tell this great-grandfather his butt doesn't belong on that sled with his great-grandson than I would tell the great-grandchild that he doesn't belong playing in the snow. But by design, we make it dangerous for this gentleman to enjoy this sport with the child he loves. By design, we put him at risk. And by design, we can make this safe and fun. And we have to start reckoning with this challenge in terms of the lifespan. We've got to stop worrying about these marker points where lights flash and suddenly you're getting older. Ladies, you know what I'm talking about when you go to the grocery store and you're in checkout and you see Vogue and they have makeup ideas for 20, 30, 40, and beyond. What am I, Captain Kirk? Mascara and the beyond. The lifespan should be celebrated, and the only way we're going to be able to embrace it is if we have those features within our homes and our communities that tell us what we're able to do instead of reminding us what we can't do. Every one of us, bottom line, wants and needs a nest. Every one of us has to have a place to call our own. It's the home. It's not a house, it's a home. And a community, family and friends. And if we don't achieve that by design, we're going to lose the game. And this is what we talk about when we refer to quality of life. This is not just social science. This is the sensibility of design. Let me introduce you to a couple of fashionistas that you want to drink with. I met these girls outside of Rome. And I sure hope they're still with us. I'll be going back next year. I'm going to look them up. At first, there was very disparaging commentary. Didn't realize that I spoke Italian about the American with the camera. And when I decided to let them off the hook and spoke to them in Italian, it was like, oops. And I explained why I'd love to have a shot and took this photo, and then we went and had a coffee, and then it was followed by lots of wine. I lovingly call them the Chameleon Sisters. They live together. And I know one day my mom, St. Trish, telling Margaret, Mary, and I will all live together. It's really going to be special. I sure hope they still have PBS, because I think it's going to make one heck of a documentary. But I remember asking, I'll protect names, this darling girl, how it was that she didn't need a cane to walk like her sister did, and we saw the pride. Essentially what she told us was she didn't need no stinking cane. Clearly there was something wrong with her sister. And later, of course, when we were looking at the image, we were coughing up a lung laughing because she's got a cane. That cane can hurt her. It might not be durable medical equipment, and we might not be able to get a tax rebate for it. It might not be assistive technology, but she's got a cane. And that's what the cane should be. We all of us use a very popular prosthetic at one time or another, whether it's to shield your eyes from the sun, or to read the tiny itty-bitty sexy type in the high-end restaurant where it's a lovely 4-point script in a dove gray on a soft gray background. And which, by the way, let me give you one of my beta tests. Just hold your menu very near the votive candle, and of course, as it catches a flame, you usually get the waiter's attention. And that is how you can tell where people have been having trouble in a restaurant and what the age level of the diners is. All those little scorch marks on the back of the leather menus. Notice a couple other things about these gals, and this is where it's fun, you know, because I play both sides of my coin. I'm a designer, I'm a strategist, and then I'm a gerontologist. The non-cane sister is carrying a garbage dump in her hand. And we spoke about this because this one was razzing this one about wasting landfill space and why she didn't have a nice little tote like she did. And this one just didn't want the ugly little tote that this one had. And oh, it went on and on for hours. It was probably the wine. But I'm sure that this is how these girls talk. And so we're always going to have this range. And for us as designers, to meet those needs is always going to be the challenge. But it's also the fun. You want nutty clients. And you always, always want to fight codes and standards. And yes, I was one of the authors of the ADA. And I wept that we had to write it. Remember, the ADA is not a design standard. It's an employment standard. It's become known as a design standard because we couldn't employ Vietnam vets who came back and, lo and behold, actually wanted to get into communities and work and have families and wheel in marathons and wheel in basketball games. These outrageous veterans changed everything. And we had to have a new employment law, a federal standard that said employers had to rebuild the world to meet their needs. But that was just the beginning. So if you just rely on the pride of saying my design meets the rigors of the ADA, then I give you a D, because it is not exemplary design. Although Lord knows we need it. One day I'm going to be somewhere and show this image, and the partner / spouse of this gentleman is going to find himself in divorce court, because how he managed to get this precious child into the New York subway system by going up and down those steps, I don't know, I don't want to know, I don't want it explained to me. It's wrong, but it points out the fact that we are all struggling with an infrastructure that was conceived of and built in by a time and a mindset that never imagined the nerve of someone with quadriplegia wanting a job, or wanting to be able to board an airplane, visit family at holiday, get married, have a family. We never imagined a world where the disabled would want such a life. And so we built ourselves, we painted ourselves into a corner. We forgot the other side of the coin, usability. And it's usability that you should be thinking about and talking about in all of your work. Because every time you design something, I assure you, your customers are going to change it. That should be part of the joy of your work. Always remember that there's another coin at play here, and this is how you build for your success. Address the needs of the primary purchaser, the person who makes decisions, the person who's got the dough, but never forget the other side, which is the primary user. A little toddler might not march into Target to pick out its ensemble. Mommy and Daddy are doing that, but the money is being spent on their behalf. Why aren't we as excited about the other end of the age continuum and caring for and about our elders? We have to provide them with choice. Life's not much fun if you don't have choice. And let me just quickly tell you, yes, this is his bike. He doesn't drive it. His great-grandson graduated from ASU and wanted it. His dad said, no. Enter Grandpa! Marketing people around our great nation have figured out that grandparents know it is their job to drive their kids crazy by catering to the needs of their grandchildren. Look at Disney. Packages for grandparents to bring the little brats. The parents are tired. They also have no disposable income. We're going after this guy. And is the Gap happy that he's wearing cargo pants? You betcha. Are you happy he's wearing cargo pants? You should. And the other side of this coin is control. And you know when you don't have it, you feel it when you do. We have to get past this idiocy of thinking growing older is about health care. I'll probably be dead, but ladies and gentlemen, I count on you to get this one right. If you don't, Remington's in a lot of doo-doo. If we don't turn around and change our perspective on this, it's never going to work. We have got to make aging and lifespan, wishes, wants, needs, and dreams about consumerism. What we do in physical rehab is units that are a microcosm of everyday living, every aspect of every activity of everyday life, in a setting with rehab nurses and docs, OTs, PTs, and patients now, instead of playing with the Marquis de Sade grab bars and mat tables and staircases to nowhere, go through activities of everyday life, things they love, they're joyous about. They learn what they can do. They're not reminded of what they can't do. This is changing the medical model. Aging in place is going to be your battle cry. I want to live where I want to live, how I want to live, as long as I want to live. Not much harder than that. But I'm going to need the tools to do it. I was in a cab. I want to know what's going on here. I am just dying to know the story. Did they meet on Match.com? Did he tell her, I'll pick you up at 7? Did she know he meant it? No one is disabled. Don't you ever let anyone tell you we become disabled with chronic illness, acute events, injuries. We are disabled by products and places and people who don't view us as equal. And design is the great enabler. Design either creates a safe pathway or builds a roadblock. And ladies and gentlemen, it's up to us to decide which it's going to be. We're a team, all ages and abilities working together. And now, more than ever before, is most certainly time. I want to read you a letter I received when the media got word of what I had done with my empathic research. It was sent to me by a nurse in England. It's traveled the globe. A number of people have laid claim to it, sort of like Desiderata. We're not really sure. Was it found in a church pew or, where did it come from? But I don't think that's really very important. I published this letter in the book that covers my research, Disguised a True Story, which you can still get on Amazon, but we will be reissuing it in honor of the 25th anniversary of the completion of the research. And in this letter, one of the elders who lived in this skilled nursing center in England asked her nurses a very poignant question. You see, this was found in her belongings after she died. And imagine these nurses tidying up her room and finding this. What do you see? What do you see, nurses? Are you thinking when you look at me, just another crabby old woman, not very wise, uncertain of habit, with faraway eyes, who dribbles her food and makes no reply when you say in a loud voice, I do wish you'd try, who seems not to notice the things that you do and forever is losing a stocking or shoe, who uninterested or not, lets you do as you will with bathing and feeding this long, long day to fill. Is that what you're thinking? Is that really what you see? Well, then open your eyes, because you're not looking at me. I'll tell you who I am as I sit here so still, as I rise at your bidding, as I eat at your will. I'm a small child of 10, and I have a father and a mother and brothers and sisters who love one another. I'm a young girl of 16, and I have wings on my feet, dreaming that soon now my lover I'll meet. A bride at 20, my heart gives the leap, remembering the vows I promised to keep. And at 25, I now have young of my own, and they need me to build a secure and happy home. A woman of 30, my young now are growing so fast, bound to each other with ties that should last. At 40, my young sons are grown and gone, but my man is beside me to see I don't mourn. And at 50, once more, babies play at my knee, and again we know children, my loved one and me. Dark days are upon me. My husband is dead. I look to the future. I shudder with dread. My young are all weary, young of their own, and I think of the years and the love that I've known. And they call me an old woman now. Nature can be so cruel. Seems it's her jest to make this age look the fool. The body can crumble, grace and vigor depart. And now there's a stone where once I know I had a heart. But inside this old carcass, a girl still dwells. And now and again, even my battered heart swells. I remember the joys, I remember the pain, and I'm loving and living my life all over again. I think of the years, all too few, gone by so fast, and I accept the stark fact that nothing does last. So I ask you nurses, please open your eyes, open and see, not a crabby old woman. If you look closer, you'll see. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you the joy of many years, and of always knowing what an incredible difference you make in the lives that you serve. And I wish you glory always. Take good care. Be well. I'll talk to you in a second.